Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. In 2002, Dr. Dragan Dabić, a specialist in alternative medicine, settled here. Nobody knew where he was from or what his occupation had been before. Dr. Dabić won instant popularity in the medical community. He gave lectures and cured people of diseases.
We see him as someone who helps people, and people love him.
In 1996, Radován Karadžić, leader of the Bosnian Serbs, was put on an international wanted list for charges of terror and exterminating people in his home country. A $5 million reward was offered for information on his whereabouts.
For 44 months, Karadžić directed a campaign of terror against a civilian population.
Radován Karadžić was arrested only in 2008 when he was brought before the International Tribunal at The Hague. During the 13-year-long manhunt for him, nobody, not even friends and close relatives, knew that Karadžić and Dr. Dabić were the same person.
Versus Mr. Radován Karadžić.
The small town of Pale, 20 kilometers from Bosnia's capital Sarajevo. The psychiatrist Radován Karadžić settled down here in the mid-1960s. He had received a thorough education in his home country, and later in the 1970s he attended Columbia University in New York. He first met his wife Liliana when he was still an undergraduate.
When I gave birth to my daughter, I was about 21 years old. Radovan was just under 22 at the time. We raised our daughter together and we grew older together. Some time passed before I gave birth to my son. And then our daughter got married. The wedding was very cheerful. Radovan was a man and our kids could rely on. But he wasn't very strict. We used democratic methods to raise our children. We lived together in Pale until the war.
In 1992, a bloody civil war broke out in Bosnia, a former part of the Republic of Yugoslavia. About half of its population call themselves Bosnian Muslims. The rest call themselves Orthodox Serbs. Radován Karadžić became leader of the Orthodox Serbs and president of the Serbian Republic in Bosnian territory.
When Radovan entered politics in 1990, he did so against his own will. He had been urged to enter politics from all sides. I was not particularly pleased. I said to him, these are going to be hard times for the two of us and the whole family. And yet, I supported his decision. If that's what you want, let it be, I said.
The war in Bosnia lasted nearly 3 years and ended in 1995 when a 50,000-strong international peacekeeping force was brought in. The country was split in two. Orthodox Serbs were now in control of nearly half the territory. In 1996, Radován Karadžić had to leave his presidential post under pressure from the International Tribunal at The Hague.
Radovan became a leader by accident. He is a psychiatrist by profession and a poet in spirit and a national leader inside. He did what he had to, and he did it fairly skillfully and honestly. He did what he could to make sure that the people acquired a state of their own.
After his resignation, Radován Karadžić disappeared from the political scene. A massive manhunt was launched against him. Every peacekeeper stationed in Bosnia had a picture of him. Post-war chaos and widespread Serb support made it possible for Karadžić to live in the town of Pale for some time, right under the noses of his pursuers.
I last saw my brother in the early winter of 1998. We would see each other late at night, hoping that we would be safer that way. He would briefly stay with us, his daughter in her flat, and then go on to stay with some other relatives. That night we also discussed questions of security. Most local people shared the view that Radovan would either be killed or arrested.
In early 2002, a flat was rented in a large residential area on the outskirts of Belgrade. Official papers said that Dr. Dragan Dabić, A retired Serb from America who specialized in alternative medicine was living in that flat. He was rumored to be able to cure people with his hands by invoking his own energy. He would stay at home all day long without venturing outside.
After the assassination of Serbian Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić in 2003, police scoured the city in search of the assassins. For that reason, Radovan thought staying at home all the time was a bad idea. He decided to show himself in public and lead a normal life to avoid suspicion. The other reason was quite commonplace. He needed to make a living somehow.
Once a man entered this office in my clinic and introduced himself as Dr. Dabić. He was wearing elegant clothes and looked very cultured. He bowed to show his respect to me. He said he wanted to help people because he possessed a very powerful energy. I told him he could use it here if it was really effective.
Dr. Sava Bojović is a professor. Some time ago, he opened a fertility clinic in the suburbs of Belgrade to study human reproduction. Bojović suggested they set up an experiment to test Dr. Dabić's skills.
We did a microscopic examination of the sperm of one of my patients. We used this microscope. The sperm was of poor quality. It wasn't active enough. I asked Dr. Dabić to test his powers on it. As I held the sample in my hands, he repeatedly passed one of his hands over it and the other underneath it. It took him 15 minutes to complete the job. After that, I examined the sample under a microscope once again. I saw that the sperm had become much more mobile. Dabić had demonstrated his very powerful energy.
Sava Bojović had a very high opinion of Dr. Dabić's skills. He wished to have a long and fruitful period of cooperation with him. This celebration marks the clinic's 20th anniversary. Dragan Dabić was among the dignitaries invited to attend it.
Thank you for coming. Nice to see you.
Dr. Dabić turned up at public functions. He made new contacts and struck up new friendships. Mia Sicak was one of Dabić's new friends. They met at the medical conference dedicated to alternative treatments. Soon he asked her to be his assistant.
Dr. Dabić invited me to go to a sick boy to examine him. We went to the house where he lived. There we met the child. His name was Danilo, and his parents.
Danilo was born in 2004 into the family of political fugitive Branko Balaban. When the war broke out, Branko, his young wife, and her parents moved from Bosnia to Belgrade. Danilo became seriously ill when he was 1 year old. He paid no attention to the people around him. His mental development slowed down. He made no attempt to engage with anybody, not even with his parents or elder sisters.
At that first meeting, Danilo constantly connected with the doctor. Soon they were already communicating with each other. The boy tugged at the doctor's beard and took his hat from him. We were surprised. It was like a miracle. Dr. Dabić wasted no time treating the boy's illness.
My son liked the doctor very much. He played with his beard and mustache.
We always met outside Danilo's house in the morning at about 7 o'clock. Dr. Dabić normally came by bicycle wearing his hat. It was a very funny spectacle.
The doctor would put his hands around the boy's head like this.
He kept his hands close to the back of the head like this. Sometimes he pressed his hands against the head. Otherwise, he kept them a short distance away. If he wanted to produce an effect on the brain, he would put his hands on this spot and keep them there for a long time.
Dr. Dabić